So up to here is the studying part of the suffering of change. Now the practice part, like first the preparation part, which is to do the refuge and supplication prayers. Then the main part, after reflecting on the suffering of the lower realms, now need to reflect or concentrate on the suffering of change by thinking no matter wherever one is born, whether it's lower realm or higher realm, one is not free from these sufferings. Even the powerful beings in the higher realms, such as universal emperor, etc., even they are born in such a powerful state, still it won't help them to avoid all the sufferings. At the end, they also need to fall down and they experience more sufferings. And also, like human beings, no matter how high we are born, we still need to experience suffering because of our own karmas. And also, when one is born on a higher state, then that does not mean one will always born in a such place or such state. Like myself, although I hold a high title in the Buddhist or in the Tibetan Buddhist community, but it does not mean I'm free from the law of karma. It does not mean I'm free from any restriction. It does not mean I can do whatever I want. So the title and the wealth, the power, is not something that can help us to do anything, or it will help us not to fall down. It is not like this. No matter how high title that you hold, no matter how rich you are, no matter how famous you are, still you are under the law of karma. If you have already abandoned all the mental afflictions, then you don't have any restrictions on your physical and verbal actions. But unless and until we attain such state, we are not free from all these restrictions. And also, the poor person can become rich, rich person can poor, rich person can become poor, etc. And also, there are 4 types of suffering, like suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And then fear of meeting enemies or fear of meeting bad persons or bad people, and then also fear of separating from the loved ones or close friends and family members, and not able to get the result as one has expected or one has wished. And if one does not have certain things, then one need to experience the suffering of looking for achieving such and such goal or looking for gaining such and such things. And if one has, then one is suffering from protecting these things from others. Then, like goats in the desire realm, they have the suffering of death, and the demigods, they have the suffering of losing the battlefield, etc. And then those worldly gods who are dwelling in the form and formless realm, and they will fall down in the lower realm in the future, and where one will experience great sufferings. So one needs to recite these, and also need to remember, and also need to concentrate on these sufferings. So one really need to reflect, one really need to think on these sufferings. It's not just enough to recite these words, but main thing is not just to recite, but main thing is to remember, to know, and to contemplate on these, so that can really make a great impact on our mind, that can really make an impact on our mind by causing us to abstain from doing or committing negative actions, and that can help us to engage in more and more positive actions. So until that kind of impact has happened, one really needs to concentrate on these things. As we know, intellectual knowledge alone will not cause us to achieve a great result. If we really wish to gain a great result from our Dharma knowledge, then we must put our Dharma knowledge into action. And through this, then one can really realize or one can gain the realization. So, and also by reflecting on all these different kinds of sufferings of the samsara, it will help us not to have a strong attachment, or not to have attachment to any parts of the samsara. So through this, one can feel sad about this samsara. One will know the nature of the samsara, which is none other than the suffering, and it can really cause us to develop the genuine thought of renunciation towards the whole samsara. And just by having the wish to gain liberation from the whole samsara will not help us to gain liberation. Based on such wish, then we must put effort to achieve this liberation. And to achieve this liberation, we must rely, or we must practice Dharma, Buddha Dharma, the authentic Buddha Dharma, in a proper way, with the right motivation, with the right practice, and with the right dedication. And to happen like this, one sincerely need to pray to Guru and Triple Gem, so that one's goal can be fulfilled without any obstacles. So this is the main part. Then the conclusion part is to dedicate one's own merits, along with all the other merits, to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all the sentient beings. Then also during the post sessions, one also need to have this kind of thought of renunciation, or like this. With such thought, then one should spend time during the post-meditative session or post-sessions. And now, the third main kind of suffering is known as the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. I think before I said the conditional nature, the suffering of conditional nature of all the phenomena, or the suffering of conditional phenomena. But I think the better word for this kind of suffering is the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Normally, we have three kinds of feelings: happiness, sufferings, and the equanimity. So sufferings, the feeling of suffering is considered as the suffering of suffering. The feeling of happiness is considered as the suffering of change. Then the feeling of equanimity is considered as the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Actually, through the suffering and suffering of change, even the non-Buddhists or the heretics can develop certain type of thought of renunciation. But however, they cannot develop full thought of renunciation depending on all the three kinds of sufferings, including the third one, which is the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. So this third kind of suffering is mentioned or explained in the Buddha's teaching. And this third kind of suffering has three subdivisions. The first one, in this text, it says, in this translation text, it says, the suffering that activities are never ending. Means our actions never ends. No matter how many actions that we have done, still there's no time for us to say, now we have done all the actions, now we don't need to do any actions. So one's actions or our actions never ends. From the birth until now, we have been doing actions after actions, but still there's no end. And while doing actions, while one has planned to do this and that kind of project or actions, at that time, certainly the Lord of Mara will take one's own life. But still, one's action has not been completed. After this life, there's some Bardo state or next life. At that time also, they still do actions after actions. So therefore, the action never ends. Action never ends, and also we don't fade up doing actions. We always want to do actions after actions. So by doing actions, we end this life, but still our action never ends. And then the second kind, or the second subdivision, is called the suffering of not being satisfied by desire. So it means no matter how many times or how much we enjoyed, on the five sense objects, still we are not satisfied. So there is not a single object of desire that could not be identified as not having been enjoyed by ourselves or by oneself since one's beginningless lifetimes. But still, we are not satisfied. We still want to enjoy the five sense objects. And then third kind of suffering is known as the suffering of never being weird of birth and death. Actually, we have been born in this samsara infinite times, but still we will born again and again until we can overcome the negative actions and mental afflictions. Until that, we will be born in this samsara under their control. So, like our mother, the present mother has been our mother not only one time, not only this time, but also many times in the past. And if we accumulate all the milks that one has drink from a single mother in this life and in the past lifetimes, then it can be more than an ocean or 4 oceans. But still, we are in this samsara, and if we still don't put any effort in doing dharma activities, then still we will be born again and again in this samsara, and again we will drink more and more milk from this single mother in the future also, in the future lives also. So therefore, there's no end in birth. We always take birth after birth. So since there's no end in the birth, then it also explains that there's no end in the death, because birth and death are dependents. So now it is a right time, or it is the best time for us, not the right time or best time, but this time we have the best opportunity to practice. Yeah, so we can say like best time or right time. In one way we can say best time or right time, but in one way we can say in the past also we got this kind of best time or right time, but we haven't used it in a proper way, so therefore in the past we have wasted our best time or right time. But now when we have this again, when we have this best time or the right time again, at this time we must use this in a proper way. So these are the 3 types of sufferings, or the 3 subdivisions of the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Now, the this up to here is the studying part. Now the practice part, the preparation is refuge and supplication. So since today, the suffering of change and the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence, these two are today's subject. So therefore, we can do one preparation. No need to do two separate preparations. So first we do one preparation, which means to do the refuge and supplication prayers. Then we do the two main parts, which means this main part of suffering of change, and also main part, which is the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. So first one preparation or the one preliminary part, then two main part. No, one main part with two main topics together, and then at the end we do one conclusion part after practicing these two main topics together. So, during the main part, first we need to reflect the main part of the suffering of change, and then we need to reflect the main part of the suffering, the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. So we must focus on the suffering of all these conditioned existence, the all-pervasive conditioned existence. And then also, so we must reflect on these three subdivisions of the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Then we should think that this samsara is like a sickness that will never recover, or it's like a prison from which one will never be freed, or it's like a traveler who never reached the destination. So one need to recite these words and also think on these words. So therefore, one should think that this samsara is full of suffering. One will never be free from this suffering unless and until one is freed from this samsara. So if you remain in this samsara, then it's like a sickness that will never recover, or prison from which one will never be freed, or like a traveler who never reaches the destination. So now, wherever one is born in this samsara or in the three realms, one is not free from the suffering. So therefore, one must practice Dharma, the pure Dharma or the authentic Dharma, in order to gain liberation from the whole samsara. And to happen this, one really need to supplicate to Guru and Triple Gem, so that one's practice can be smooth without any obstacles. Then the conclusion part, as before, is to do the dedicating the merits that you have earned through this practice, along with all the merits, to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all the sentient beings. And then also, during the post-sessions, one has to be vigilant, and one has to be under the direct guidance of one's own mindfulness and alertness, etc. So with this, our today's teaching has been completed. And now, since today is a Saturday, we will have question and answer session.
The first is a general question. Your Holiness, could you please define the terms attachment, anger, and ignorance and explain how to recognize them in the mind and how to work with them most effectively?
Actually, attachment is considered, as you know, it's considered as a mental affliction. So, for example, if we have attachment to a person, then it means that thought is based on biased thought. So this is different from loving kindness. Loving kindness also is a thought that wish to help others or that really likes others, but loving kindness is based on it's not based on biased thought, but the attachment is based on biased thought. And also, loving kindness is something that we need to extend towards all the sentient beings without any exception. But the attachment is something that we have for few persons, not to all the beings. And when one have the attachment, then even that person does something bad, still we think it's good. Because our mind is based on biased thought. Our thought is based on biased thought. So the biased thought will not see the reality, cannot see the actual action, the nature of actual action, can only see the person. But also attachment is not only to a person, can also be to a food, clothes, or other objects. So attachment is it's a thought, or it's a mental factor, semjung, and it's one of the 6 root mental affliction, and or one of the 3 poisons. So it means one really like based on biased thought, etc. And then anger. Anger means wish to harm, wish to harm others, or the one that destroy the peaceful mind. And also anger is, anger is caused by others, or anger, sometimes anger can be caused by others' harmful actions, but sometimes without others' harmful actions, one can get angry. Sometimes like if one needs to line up or wait for so long time, then one gets angry. Or if your own team, the team that you support, if that team lose, then one gets angry. Although they have not done anything bad to you, but because they lost, then one gets angry, etc. So anger is a mind that is the mental factor that can destroy our peaceful mind, and that creates lots of problems. In short, one can say anger is a more serious negative action. As it in the Junju it says Shedanta Vidikva Me, it means there's no non-virtues like anger. And then the ignorance Actually, in the Ratnavali by great Acharya Nagarjuna, he says, in that text, he defines the negative actions by saying, the action that is caused or action that is motivated by the attachment, anger, and ignorance are called the negative actions. So when he said this kind of ignorance is not the general ignorance, it's a part of ignorance, or it's a particular ignorance. It is not all the ignorance. Because if this ignorance is the general ignorance, then it means we as an ordinary human being cannot do any virtues because we always have ignorance. So whatever we do is motivated by our own ignorance. So then it means we don't have any virtue. We always do non-virtues. So therefore, I think first it is important to know the different kinds of ignorance. And in the Ratnavali text, when it says ignorance, it does not refer to all the ignorance. It refers to a particular ignorance. So I think we can divide the ignorance into like three kinds. Ignorance or not knowing about the law of karma, and ignorance or not knowing about the reality or the ultimate view, and third, the ignorance or not knowing about the all the informations about the objects. Like noble bodhisattvas, they don't know all the informations about the objects because they are not omniscient. So they still have ignorance because they still have the obscuration of knowledge, which is also none other than ignorance. So when it says negative action means our action was motivated by ignorance, that ignorance is particular ignorance, which means that ignorance is the ignorance or not knowing about the law of karma. That ignorance can cause you to do negative actions. And this does not refer to other kinds of ignorance. And also, in the 12 interdependent origination, the first one is called ignorance. But that ignorance is also not all the ignorance. The first of the 12 interdependent origination, or 12 links, the first one is called ignorance, and that ignorance is the Kansagi Danzin, grasping to a self of a person, grasping to a self of a person. And then there's a root root ignorance, which is the root of the 12 link. And that root is called ignorance, I think, and that refers to the grasping to a self of a phenomena. So both these two grasping are also called ignorance. So one that is in the 12 link is the grasping to a self of a person, and not all the ignorance. So I think the word ignorance is very wide. The word ignorance can have different meanings depending on different contexts. Actually, all the obscurations are none other than the ignorance. So sometimes I think we can say not all the ignorance are mental affliction. Because like the noble bodhisattvas, they don't have mental afflictions according to the, I think, Madhyamika school. but they do have obscuration of knowledge, and that obscuration of knowledge is also a part of or is a kind of ignorance. It is called ignorance because I think the word ignorance and the obscuration is, I think, like the same, because both means not knowing, or there's some obstruction or obscuration that blocks them from knowing. So, in one way, one can say all the obscurations are ignorance. So, therefore, the word ignorance is very wide and can have different meaning depending on different contexts. But when we say the cause of negative actions are ignorance, that ignorance is not knowing about the law of karma. And how to work with them most effectively, I think first we need to recognize these negative thoughts. Without recognizing it, it is not possible to adopt the right remedy. Just like without diagnosing the right sickness, it is not possible to have the right treatment. So similarly, first it is important to know these negative thoughts as it is, and then try to remember or try to contemplate on the consequence of having these negative thoughts. And when we see these consequences, then it really helps us to abstain from having these, or one can really put effort to adopt the right remedy or the right antidote which can overcome all these negative thoughts.
And then 2 questions on renunciation. The first, the intense experience of great suffering due to a temporary condition can give rise to heartfelt compassion for others who are also suffering in a similar way, thus effectively ending one's own agony. Can this compassion also be considered a form of genuine renunciation?
So, the intense experience of great suffering due to a temporary condition means the suffering that we really experience in this life, right? Yeah, actually, this can give rise to compassion, but just by experiencing our own suffering, or just by knowing the suffering due to a temporary condition, I think cannot give rise to great compassion, or it is not necessary to give rise to great compassion by knowing our own human suffering. Because when we see great suffering of human beings, or when we experience by ourselves, then that can help us to extend our object of compassion, or it can help us to improve our nature of compassion. But it is not necessary that it can help us to extend our compassion towards all the sentient beings. For example, those who don't believe in the rebirth, those who don't believe in any religion, but they still have a good heart to help others. They still wish to help poor. They still wish to help poor by building schools and hospitals, and they want to support others out of their own limited compassion. So it is not necessary to rise infinite compassion just by knowing or just by experiencing our own human suffering. One cannot extend the great compassion, because I think to extend great compassion, first we need to know, or first we need to identify the object of compassion, which is to identify all the beings of the six realms, including the Bharata beings. Without identifying all these objects, I think it's not possible for us to develop the great compassion or the infinite compassion. So, I think by knowing the temporary condition, one cannot give rise to the great compassion. And then second, in this world, just by having this kind of limited compassion, it is not considered as a thought of renunciation. Because thought of renunciation means not any kind of renunciation. If one can renounce poor country or any particular place, that is not considered as a genuine renunciation. If we like some place and if we dislike or if we want to renounce some place, then it is not the full renunciation. So to have the full renunciation, we must abandon the attachment towards the whole samsara, not only the part of samsara. So just by having the temporary or limited compassion, I think it won't be considered as a genuine renunciation.
The second question related to renunciation. On one hand, we learn about the hell realms to encourage renunciation, while on the other hand, we hear about the cultivation of wisdom and bodhicitta to transform such experiences and to liberate us from them. Could you offer further advice on when to apply each of these two approaches?
So these two approach means to develop renunciation and to develop or cultivate wisdom and bodhicitta. I think the learning about the hell realm is learning about the sickness. And renunciation, encouraging renunciation is like wish to recover from the sickness. And then bodhicitta and wisdom are like the medicine that can cure the sickness. So first, need to know the sickness. Then second, need to have the wish to recover from the sickness. Then third, need to adopt the right medication to recover from the sickness. So similarly, I think first need to know the suffering, not only the suffering of hell realms, but the suffering of all this, the suffering of whole samsara. When Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, when Buddha Shakyamuni first turned the wheel of Dharma in Saranath Varanasi, he turned the wheel of Dharma on the Four Noble Truths by saying, first one should know the suffering of truth, and then one should abandon the suffering of the truth of origin, etc. So first we need to know the sufferings. Then second, then we need to have this thought of renunciation. Then third, based on our renunciation, then we need to develop bodhicitta, and wisdom.
Now, a few questions related to the hell realms. The first, in Sakya Pandita's clarifying the sage's intent, a story was mentioned where, in order to purify the subtle obscurations preventing their attainment of Buddhahood, disciples were reborn in a hell realm instead of attaining the Shravaka's nirvana. Does this mean that we too will be reborn in a hell realm for the purpose of this final purification, or is this an unusual case due to the special karma of these individuals?
Actually, I think all depends on individuals. For example, like during the Buddha Shakyamuni's time, there's a person called Angulimala. First, he has killed many beings, many human beings, and he has done very serious negative actions. But then later he met Buddha Shakyamuni and entered into the path of Dharma, and then he studied and practiced and became a great practitioner or a great Buddhist. So for such person, he didn't go to hell realms because through the power of his study and practice on Dharma, he was able to purify all his negative karmas, so that without going through the hell realms, he was able to progress on the path. So it is not necessary to go down in the hell realms to purify one's own remaining negative karmas. So it all depends on individuals.
Are members of the monastic sangha who have committed serious transgressions of their vows, such as causing division in the community, necessarily reborn in the hell realms? Or is it possible for them to avoid such fate by purifying this karma?
Actually, negative actions are the cause of suffering. But the beauty of negative action is that if one can adopt the right remedy to purify, then there's nothing that cannot be purified. So any negative actions can be purified by the right method or right remedy. So serious transgressions of their own vows can be purified by powerful Dharma practices without receiving the result of such actions. So actually, actions are like negative actions will produce negative result, but before the result is ripened, if one can do a purification ritual, or if one can purify, then without receiving the result, one can progress on the path. One can purify and one can avoid these results if one do the actual purification or proper purifications.
When the karma causing a being to experience the suffering of the deepest hell is exhausted, is it possible to then become a bodhisattva and eventually a Buddha?
Of course. There's a story that Buddha Shakyamuni, in the past, when he takes what we call Mata Bekyawa, when he takes impure rebirth long time ago, like countless eons ago, in one of his impure rebirth, he was born as a hell being. 가서 싱더덴베케 God Pula. Actually, in that particular hell realm, he and another person, another being, are pulling the cart together. And at that time, the other person is like very tired, weak and tired. So he pulled his own kind of quota, his own share, but also he pulled the other's share. So when the messengers of Lord of Death knew that, then the messengers hit like burning iron or something on his head. Then he died. The one who wished to help the other puller died. Actually, that person was one of the Buddha's impure rebirth. So because of this genuine wish to help other, because of this this kind of altruistic thought or mind, and due to this, his bad karma are exhausted, and he take higher rebirth, and then later he developed bodhicitta and became bodhisattva, and eventually attained the Buddhahood. So this story, or this kind of story, clearly shows that even one is born in the hell realm can become bodhisattva and eventually a Buddha.
There are soldiers who have fought in wars and killed others, who are interested in practicing the Dharma. Upon reading teachings on the hell realms, they might become fearful of having created the causes to be reborn in the lower realms. What would be your advice to these men and women?
I think just read the story of Angulimala. Angulimala has killed almost 1,000 people, but still able to progress on the path. So likewise, even to those soldiers who have done serious negative actions, but their actions can be purified, and also they can progress on the path. Actually, for armies, like in the Abhidhamma Kosha by Vasubandhu, it clearly says, Mala soba 23 tamje chapa portion then, which means, for example, if like in one regiment or in one group, if there are 100 army going to the battlefield and try to kill the enemy, at that time, one of these 100 army, if one of these army killed enemy, but the negative action of killing is not only committed by this actual killer, the one who is with the actual killer, they will also have the negative karma of killing one enemy. Each of these 100 persons will have the negative karma of killing that particular person, because they all went there with the same goal to kill the enemy. So because of this, even though the actual killer is one person, but the negative karma of killing the other is received by all these members of that particular group. So to do negative action is not necessary. To commit the negative action, it is not necessary to do by ourselves. If one ask others to do, or if one support, or if one go to if one have the same goal to do, or if one rejoice in others, then they will also have the same amount of negative actions. But anyway, all this negative action can be purified through the right remedies, and anyone can progress on the path.
I have heard that realized masters can go to the hell realms to rescue their students. Could you please explain how this is possible?
Actually, in the Bodhisattva Avatara text, the great Acharya Shanideva said, Tena meto dazeki, gyalun neba shegyane, daigi dungal masalte, mangbe dungal sekyurchiri, teda gyune komgyurba, shengi dungal shigawe, peme tsoro ngangpatar, nanme bayan jubarin gyurus. In short, the actual meaning is like swans, swans will happily enter into the lake where there's lotus flowers, right? So similarly, these realized masters, with great joy, they will go to the hell realms to help others, just like swans happily enters into the lake where there's a lotus. So due to the power of their infinite loving kindness, infinite compassion, and bodhicitta, they are happy to do any action, and they are happy to go to anywhere, even in the hell realm, to help others.
Just as a clarification on this question, I assume that it means the masters who are, while they are alive, and while they are alive, they still go to hell realms to rescue beings, but they don't have to physically reborn there.
Oh.
I assume.
Okay. I think sometimes there are stories, some living masters going down in the hell realm or going to other realms and then returning back. So it depends on individual masters. I think I heard some stories like this, so I think there are some who can go and return to the present life.
After hearing the teachings on the minor hells, which explain that hell beings can exist in the human realm in the form of pillars and trees, etc., I wonder how to distinguish sentient beings from objects and plants, so that I can live a virtuous life without harming beings due to my inability to differentiate between the two animate beings and the inanimate world.
Yeah, sometimes I think it is difficult to differentiate between objects and plants, or beings from objects, sentient beings from objects and plants. Yeah, sentient beings from objects and plants, because due to their own karma, they really look like a inanimate object. So they become destitute, because if they look different from other inanimate objects, then someone can help. But since because of their own karma, their own negative karma, they don't receive any help. So they look like pillar or other inanimate objects. So I think because of their own karma, for us it is difficult to distinguish between sentient beings from objects and plants. That is because of their own karma, or for their own karma to experience such and such sufferings. Like the great Tibetan Mirti, or the Pandita Mirti, even he know that his mother has been born under this stop, and even he tried to help her by working as their servant. But still, when the time is not ripened for her to be free, even after working there as their servant, still he could not get the stove as a substitute for his own salary. So then, when mother's negative karmas are exhausted, then he needs to steal the stove from this rich family. So until their own karma is exhausted, I think it's not. They will not receive any help from others.
As a follow-up on that, so that since we cannot distinguish it, should it be something we don't worry about?
Anyway, all the time we should act based on the right motivation, and then apart from that, it's just worrying about this. It will not help them.
And very much related question. It is taught that from the point of view of wisdom, the whole external world, with all its objects, is but an illusion projected by one's own mind. How then is it possible to be reborn as a pillar or a wall, etc.? Are the walls I am seeing now the rebirth of other beings, or are they projections of my own mind?
Actually, we say all the appearance or all the objects that we see are projection of one's own mind. But that does not mean that someone can. That does not, block from someone being born as a pillar or wall. They can be born as a pillar or wall, but still they are projection of one's own mind. Just like other beings, not only the pillars or walls, but other beings. Other beings are also projection of one's own mind. So from my side, all are projection of my own mind. But from your side, all the others are projection of your own mind.
And two questions related to the continuation of the practice based on the three visions. I'm going to read them together because they are related. How should we continue to practice based on these teachings after this course? That's the first. And the second, should we do these contemplations before or after our sadhana practice, or before or after shamatha practice? Or is it better to devote a separate session to the contemplations from this teaching?
I think first, I think the teaching organizers will make a schedule for all the students to follow for the next 1 year. Like this month, this topic to be practiced, or one need to practice or study and practice on this topic, and then next month other topic like this. So the teaching organizer will make a schedule for the next 1 year or until the next year teaching. And then second, actually like these topics that we study nowadays, it's a common foundation or common preliminary teachings. So it's good to reflect on these before doing the sadhana or before practicing Dharma, because before practicing Dharma, we need to develop the right motivation. And to develop the right motivation, first we need to develop the thought of renunciation towards all samsara. And to develop the thought renunciation, we need to reflect, or we need to concentrate on the sufferings of the whole samsara. So by reflecting or by practicing on these sufferings, that will help us to develop the thought renunciation. And by developing the genuine thought renunciation, that will help us to develop loving kindness and compassion to all the beings, and that will help us to develop the genuine bodhicitta, and then that completes the right motivation. Then based on the right motivation, then we need to practice any kinds of Dharma. To do any practice of Dharma, first and foremost, it is important to have these these positive thoughts, or the right motivation. And also, in the beginning, if we are not so used to it, if we are not so familiar with these teachings, then in the beginning we can have a separate session or separate time to study and contemplate and practice on them. And then, and also at the same time, one can think on this in brief before doing any practice. And then, after a long time, when one is familiar with this, then one can do better concentration on this before any practices.